Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 140.
Oh, Ben, you know I love the episodes that end in zeros or fives. So, Ben, the website formerly known as Twitter. Okay. That website was started in 2006 with this novel, crazy idea that just whatever pops in your head for whatever reason, you just type out a little message and send it off into the ether for the entire world to, I don't know, look at. And I appreciate the original name, Twitter, and what you sent was tweets, because that's what it felt like. It felt like there was this tree full of birds all chirping at each other, and nobody cared.
And the defining characteristic of it was that it was brief.
Yes, that's the whole point. And the brevity is important. It was limited to 140 characters originally.
There it is. Nice.
Yeah, already came right through. They actually upped that in 2017 to 280 characters.
Yeah, twice as much.
They did some research about it. Everybody said like, "Oh, Twitter sucks now because they upped the limit, and now you don't have to think about the tweets that you quote." But apparently, like the metrics that they put out were saying that people were only bumping up against the 140 character limit like 1% of the time anyway. So, it was kind of a nothing burger, I guess.
Okay. Well, speaking of tweets in 140s, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos tweeted this week, because I refuse to call it the other name, something to the effect of, I intend to give most of my $140 billion away to charity. There's 140 again. It wasn't that number, but that's what I'm making it for the purpose of episode 140. And there was this great retweet that someone gave where they commented on it and said, somebody got visited by 3 ghosts last night.
Bah humbug, Jeff Bezos. What were you doing that was so bad that Dickinsonian spirits had to come out of the ground and talk to you?
I loved it. That was good. Tweet of the week. Chef's kiss. So from last time, you had told me about a book series, and you wanted to make a slight correction.
Yes. Okay, so this... I gotta relook at the show notes.
Feels like I talked about a historical fiction called Silence. It was about the Japanese in the 15th century or 17th century. I don't remember. And you recommended something else. So go ahead.
So I made the offhand comment that if you liked historical fiction, you should go read Outlander. And then I advised our listeners not to tell you what that was. And
right.
So, Ben, I don't know if you did any research into Outlander at all.
You sent me a link to add to the show notes because you said there would be a link in the show notes. So I put the link in the show notes.
You didn't read the link. Okay.
But I didn't read it.
Okay. Outlander is a genre that, I don't know if this is the correct term, but this is what I call it. It's housewife porn.
Oh.
It's basically just smut.
But historical.
She time travels back into the Middle Ages in England by going through the Stonehenge somehow. Okay.
And it's about guys with washboard abs and ripped open shirts, but a long time ago.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So she took... Actually, so my wife, after she listened to the podcast and heard me call Outlander historical fiction, like immediately paused the podcast, found where I was physically, and came and corrected me. Okay. Outlander absolutely is not historical fiction. It absolutely is not. Now, so she just wanted to make sure on the record, my wife does read legitimate historical fiction, not just housewife porn.
So and if we tried to... Okay, sorry.
No worries. Like I had to call this out by name. The other series, what's it called? I don't even have it written down, but there's another series of books that are more legit historical fiction by Ken Follett. And that's the one I read with her, and those are legit historical fiction. She reads legit historical fiction.
Okay, but if it's fiction and it's set in a this Earth time period that's not this one or the future, then what do we call it? If it's not historical fiction.
If it's fictional, but it's set in like an alternate timeline, is that what you're talking about?
No, if it's fictional and set in the past, why is it not historical fiction?
Well, so Outlander was described as having elements of romance, adventure, and traditional fantasy. So because of the sci-fi time travel aspect of it, I think it falls more into a fantasy category than it does a historical fiction.
Okay. I don't know. It just feels like that still seems like the correct genre for it.
I think historical fiction has a higher bar for trying to be historically accurate and just telling a story that may or may not have actually happened.
But if it's just a Hallmark Channel romance set in the past, how is it inaccurate?
Well, if it was a Hallmark Channel romance set in the past, nobody would read it. It's rated R, man. This is like the stuff that you see on Cinemax after midnight, okay?
Okay. It gets disqualified because it's smut.
There you go.
You get the smut ban.
So that's the thing is I wanted, like, there was a bit of a discussion, what is and isn't historical fiction. Can historical fiction be smut or vice versa?
So there's a movie that was filmed in the 70s. It's very controversial called Caligula.
Okay.
And it's set at the peak or the height of the role of the Rome, but it was known for its extended, explicit sexuality.
Okay.
That was supposedly very accurate to the Roman Empire, but for the sensibilities of the people at the time it was filmed, it was just pornography.
I mean, at the height of Rome, I imagine there was quite a bit of debauchery and hedonism going on.
Right. So they're like, roll cameras. All right. There's another point I want to make. So we talked about Arcane Season 2 last time, and you rightfully taken me to task a bit on what I'd said. I was uncomfortable with how the female leads seemed to be doing things that were traditionally male. And you did like you do, and like you need to open your mind, Ben. You're old-fashioned and all that kind of stuff. Great. It was still bugging me, and I was thinking about it, and I realized what the problem is, and I have a new way to say it. So here's what my issue was.
Okay.
It didn't feel like it was legitimate female characters doing things that were reserved for males. It felt like it was men playing a video game with a female avatar. That's what it felt like.
So you were uncomfortable with these female avatars doing manly men stuff?
It was men acting out their fantasies with hot female characters.
Well, that's what I do constantly. All of my female avatars are female.
Exactly. And that's why I was uncomfortable with it. This wasn't liberation. This wasn't female rights. This was just dudes with hot female characters making them make out. Like, all right, let's make them make out now.
Does that make you feel better to think that these are just dudes?
It's
that look
why
like
it was
girls?
bugging me. It didn't feel like it was real female power. It felt like it was just dudes playing with female avatars.
Well, what's
that's not empowerment.
Hang on.
That's not female representation.
No, but I'm trying to unpack this. So, like, this is what made you uncomfortable is that these females are doing manly men stuff.
No,
and that's making me I'm trying to unpack
no.
it. I don't get it.
No, it felt like men acting out their fantasies with female avatars. That's what it felt like. So, listeners, I know we have a few that watch Arcane Season 2. If you also got that feeling, I want to know I'm not alone.
Well, but it wasn't a game. You were watching a video game. You were watching a piece of fiction.
I know.
But so, like, how does that translate? This is the part that I'm not connecting with.
It could have been a game. Games have gotten that good. The graphics have gotten that good. If I'm watching footage from a game and it's a dude with the headset on playing, but he's got a hot female character as his avatar and he's doing whatever a dude would do, but his character is female. That's what it felt like watching in the movie.
So you're uncomfortable with the female, what the characters that were portrayed as females.
It wasn't legitimate female representation. It wasn't female characterization. It wasn't representing women. It was just a dude with a hot female avatar doing what he thought was cool.
I don't know if either of us are equipped to say this was a good or a bad depiction of women in power.
That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
We have a listener audience. So this week, my daughter, a 9th grader, had the usual Christmas choir concert where you get together. And I was dragging my feet a little bit because I'd gotten here a year ago. I'd just gotten back from Kuwait. I got here I think my plane landed the same day as her concert. So I went to it a year ago, and I was kind of dreading what this particular school does, where they bring in like 7 different choirs and they all sing 3 numbers. And since she's got a captive audience hostage in this auditorium, she also, as a hobby, has a community choir of adults, and she intersperses them throughout the kids.
Oh, fun. It's just a whole singing day.
It felt like being a hostage. Like, I can't set up this adult community choir to sing on a different night and have people show up, so I'm going to intersperse it throughout your kids that you're here to see so that you have to listen to it.
So that's how it feels when my daughter's in dance class and they have their big recital day, and it's like it's a very long time, but it's all the different classes have to do their number, and none of the kids get to go home until everybody's done. And yes, it does feel very captive audience.
So I went. They had two performances: a 5:30 performance and a 7:00 performance. I got there for the 5:30 performance, and I looked at the program, and it had two different versions of the layout. And the adult community choir only sang in the 7:00 performance, so I missed it.
oh, dang! What a bummer.
And my daughter was adorable, and she looked cute in her dress, and she sang wonderfully, and it brought the holiday spirit, and I had a great time.
If she's in ninth grade, she's not going to appreciate you calling her cute anymore. She's got to have Riz now, then.
I don't know if I'm ready for that. I did have a listener approach us about League of Legends, and they mentioned that you had mentioned the extremely high barrier to entry of trying to play this massive online battle arena that is League of Legends.
Yes.
And they said they were aware of that, and Riot Games created a spin-off about 5 years ago called TFT. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
It stands for...
Both of us click the link in the show notes. What is it?
Team Fight Tactics.
Okay. It's like a little hex grid, and you've got some...
It's an auto battler. They call it like auto chess, where basically you select the characters, you set them up, and then you just let it go, and it does it with very little interaction from the player. But because of that, it keeps the ceiling of how high the skill element of the game is low. So I think this is a tactic of modern game production companies to prevent your whales from overwhelming your noobs.
Okay. Well, none of these skills that you're going to develop in this game are going to translate to the other game.
Right. It's just the same characters and worlds.
This is for me. This game is like, oh, I love the story and the characters are cool and I like the art style, but I cannot handle all of the complexity and the time it takes to do this.
Yeah. So one of our listeners recommended it. Maybe I'll check it out. Teamfight Tactics, TFT.
You do not need another pay-to-win online mobile game.
Josh, you know me too well. Did you get the usual recap from your music service? I know you and I both subscribe to YouTube Premium, so we use YouTube as our thing. Did you get sent that thing?
I did, but I didn't look at it this year because the only reason I looked at it last year is because you made me look at it. We asked about it on the podcast
episode.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't necessarily want to go through those again, although my top entry was my son's song that he wrote that was performed by his choir back in. That was my most listened to song this year.
Oh, that's cool.
But this is what I want to ask you, and I saw a meme about it, and I want to get your thought on it. When do those come out? They release them over Thanksgiving weekend, right?
Yeah, so I pulled mine up, and yeah, it came out. It says 1 month ago, so right around the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay, so they come out right around Thanksgiving time, and they present themselves as a recap of your annual music listening habits. So here's my question, because they always say the year. This is 2024, the year in review. What happens to the month of December?
All right, so it could be a rolling 12. This could be November to November.
Maybe. If it was, would you have Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas Is You on your list? Do they deliberately omit December?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't know.
And does it throw off the numbers if they don't omit December because you spend December listening to the songs that pop up in your recap playlist? So it's kind of cyclical.
Yeah, so December is just an off month. Either they're listening to the songs that we already fed them, which is going to throw the dynamic off anyway. It becomes a circular calculation like in Excel.
Or you're listening to entire genre of music we only listen to for the month of December.
I don't listen to Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas. You have ruined that song for me.
What Christmas music do you like?
So lately we've just been we got one of those little AI spy machines in our kitchen, and we just tell it to play Christmas music. And whatever comes up, and it's always very random, and a lot of it is very Rat Packy, older musicians just singing with that Grady voice.
So we turned on a playlist like that. Today, my family and I drove up to Salt Lake City for Brickfest Live, which was a Lego traveling convention. It was probably for kids younger than ours, but when we got there, we ran into a couple old friends and had a great talk and made it worth the trip, but otherwise I wouldn't recommend it. However, on the way up there, we were listening to this Christmas song playlist, and all the way we were making out loud, just kind of cataloging all of the things they talk about in those songs that absolutely don't apply anymore, that we don't do. There was roasting marshmallows, chestnuts, being afraid of the plans we made. What's to be afraid of? Sitting around a fire telling scary ghost stories. What kind of tradition is that?
Dickens started that story.
Okay,
Just
so I
ask
guess
Jeff
A
Bezos.
Christmas Carol is a scary ghost story?
How is it not? He's visited by death.
But it has a happy ending, and they leave ambiguity as if the ghosts even existed.
The rich guy gets to continue being rich? Like, is that really a happy ending, Ben?
It could have just been a bad... Well, he became charitable and gave his wealth away. Go Jeff Bezos. All right. The meme I saw regarding those end-of-year playlists was someone saying, finally, December is here. I can listen to music without Instagram spying on me.
With the idea that nobody, like, December's just the off month.
Sorry, I meant Spotify. But yes,
Spotify, yeah.
You get it.
I gotcha, yeah.
Okay, but since it's the holiday season, Josh, I want you to do something that you promised me that you would do on this episode of Bad at Magic and totally geek out with numbers and spreadsheets and all that crap. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Okay, so yeah, I gave Ben a little bit of a teaser on this. Last weekend, we went to my brother-in-law, who is in a choir. Yeah, that's part of a nonprofit kind of orchestra choir thing, and they put on concerts. And not only are we season ticket holders, Ben, but we are mezzanine level donors.
Here I am complaining about community choirs, and you're a mezzanine level donor to one.
Our names are in the program right there. At the
You went to the 5:30 and the 7 o'clock performance.
No, definitely didn't do that. It's a volunteer thing. Nobody gets paid, so it's real hit or miss. Their brass section particularly needs work. Like every time, it's like, ooh, guys, come on, you're killing me. But so it's also a bit of art, and it's a bit of like, hey, kids, we're going to sit here and ingest something cultural for like an hour and a half, and you can't fidget, and no, you don't get an iPad, and no, you don't get to read a book or whatever. You're going to sit here and just be patient and accept this whole thing for what it is. So it's a good tool for parenting to try to, I don't know, teach your kids how to just be bored for a while, for lack of a better phrase. But I was bored out of my skull for this one. Well, it was the Christmas concert, and it's like a lot of traditional like hymns and stuff, and it's like, I just don't care. But they did the 12 Days of Christmas. Now, to their credit, they did it in a weird way, where every day of Christmas was sung in a different style. Going back through time. Like one of them was like, Mozart was like number 4 and back down. And then they did like a swing style at some point. And then they ended with John Philip Sousa or something like as number 12. So it was unique and interesting, but it took them a long time.
Nice.
And so Ben, being the math guy, I couldn't help
You were sitting there trying to make yourself unbored.
Yes, I was just staring into space and realized they got to 4 calling birds. I'm like, this is a lot of birds. Like, these birds are starting to add up. And so then I started doing the math. Like, I got a little golf pencil and started doing the math on the program for the concert we were in to figure out how many gifts this person actually received. Like, if your true love actually gave you all this crap for 12 full days. And then...
Is the intent that they do it repeatedly? Like...
This is my understanding of the song. It says, like, on the 3rd day of Christmas, my true love gave to me...
And you list the 3 things?
3 French hens, 2 calling birds, and a partridge in a pear tree. Like, that's inclusive.
Right.
So
2 turtle doves, but yeah.
Oh, what did I say? Doesn't matter.
Calling birds. Well, it's, yeah.
4 calling birds.
It's 4 calling birds,
hens,
2 turtle doves.
2 turtle doves. Like, listeners,
go
look it up. We're not going to do the whole thing. But I started doing the math. And it's sitting there, I realized, and I had this epiphany after I saw this number, and then my brain just started, just took off.
This is the part that I loved, because I thought surely this has been done before, that someone just added up all the numbers. But what you did, where you calculated out the financial cost of it like an accountant, I don't know that... Has that been done? Did you find it out there?
Ben, I made it. All right, so buckle in. This is more than you ever wanted to know about.
Oh, man. This is awesome.
Okay. First of all, it's 184 birds, okay?
That's a lot of birds.
So if we go through the math of it real quick, because on the 12th day you get 12 drummers drumming, but you only get that once. But the 11 pipers piping you get twice. That's 22 pipers. And so the way that this adds up is actually very symmetrical, and I love it to death. It's 12 partridges, 22 turtle doves, 30 French hens, 36 calling birds, 40 golden rings, 42 geese, 42 swans, 40 maids, 36 ladies, 30 lords, 22 pipers, and 12 drummers. Okay?
Okay. That was gorgeous.
All right, well...
I smell an infographic coming.
How much does
the show notes?
Well, how much does it cost to maintain a bird? Well, Ben, luckily for us, we have a frame of reference. So we have French hens in this thing. And so if we consider a French hen as an average chicken, the average chicken has a weight of 5.7 pounds, okay?
Okay.
And the average chicken takes half a pound of feed per day. You can get at a value bag for 50 pounds of feed, you can get it at $17, which means that's 34 cents of feed per pound if you're buying it that way. Okay, now, if we take the chicken, 5.7 pounds of chicken requires 0.5 pounds of feed per day. We can use the weight as kind of our target to adjust the cost of the other birds. So the average partridge is only 1.2 pounds, which is 0.2 of a chicken, and so they only cost 4 cents a day. A dove is 0.3125 pounds, or so they only 0.055% of a chicken, so they're only a penny a day. Hens are chickens, so they're our baseline. Calling birds are 0.22 pounds, so they're only 1 cent a day. Geese are average of 10 pounds, which is 1.7 chickens, so they're 30 cents a day of feed. And
I feel like Wesley listening to Vicini describe his logic for which cup to pick. Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Maybe I'm going into too much detail, but I don't care. I like it. Swans, on average, are 24 pounds, Ben. That's 4 chickens per swan. That's 72 cents per day per swan.
Okay, but I feel like you're oversimplifying it if you're just doing it based on the cost of buying one at market.
No. This is not the cost of the bird. This is how much it would cost to feed that bird based on the average weight of a chicken.
All right. Carry on then.
You're not listening. I laid this all out at the beginning.
I also saw your spreadsheet.
I'm using the weight.
I'm giving you a hard time to give you an opportunity to explain.
To razz you. Got it. Okay, cool. I appreciate that. Okay, so for all of the birds, so the partridges are only $150 a year. The turtle doves are $75 a year. The French hens are like $1,800. The calling birds, real small. They're only $88 a year. The geese, they're $4,500.
What is a calling bird? Did you find out?
So a blackbird, actually. Calling birds is a colloquial name for many different types of birds. For England at the time, apparently blackbirds were considered calling birds.
Ooh, I love that you knew the answer when I asked. Carry on.
Dude, I did way too much research. The geese were $4,500, but the swans. Ben, the swans. Because remember, you got 42 swans. They are 72 cents a day. That is almost $11,000 worth of feed in a year for these swans, okay? Just birds. We're talking $17,700 and some change per year to maintain these birds.
Assuming you have the space and facility.
Okay. I cards on the table. I did not factor room and board into any of this.
Okay.
I'm a little disappointed in myself that I didn't, but it's okay. Now,
all right. So birds out of the way. That's $11,000.
Yeah, $17,000.
$17,000.
Okay, so birds are out of the way. Okay, now we have people because you received people, Ben. You got maids and milk.
Wait, Josh, are you assuming slaves here?
I'm not assuming slaves. I am assuming that you're
hiring them on
you have been encumbered with employees. That is what has happened. So we've got maids, ladies, lords, pipers, and drummers. Okay, so let's start with the maids. That's easy. Went on to a normal. Actually, a normal. I went to 6 different websites to look for what the average wage that an entry level maid would make, like if you're a housekeeper. I found the minimums, the maximums. I went with the medians, averaged the medians. we get about $35,000 per year. Okay.
Holy crap.
So if their salaries, you got 40 maids, Ben, because you got them 5 times. So
you're going to need them to clean up after all those birds.
So it comes out to a little shy of $1.3 million in annual salary to the maids. Okay, I'm going to skip lords and ladies for now because those were my favorite. I'm going to go to pipers and drummers. You know what, Ben? That sounds an awful lot like a musician to me. What does an entry-level musician make? And so I started looking around, and for some reason, this is very well documented for different cities in California. So screw it, that's what we'll do. And it's, long story short, the average is just shy of $53,000 per year for a professional musician. You've got 12 drummers.
So you get drummers, okay.
And 22 pipers.
And pipers, yeah.
That's right. And so if we use those as the salary, then those together, all of these musicians, is about $1.7 million worth of salary a year. Okay. Now the lords and ladies. Ben, lords and ladies, they don't have, they're not employees. They're not. They have residual income from their properties. This is the whole point, is they're titled lords and ladies, a titled peerage. Okay, so they're receiving rents. They have their own sustain. You don't have to pay them a penny. Aha! But in the House of Lords, which is a branch of or a chamber of the UK Parliament, they have a House of Lords, and there are lords and ladies that sit in this house. Right. Well, because they are sitting in that house and not tending to their own manors, the government has to give them a stipend, a daily payment for the days that they are in session. Okay? It's 361 British pounds per day that they are in attendance, which translates, as of December 15th, that translates to $455 per day, US dollars. So if you go back and we look at the last 25 years of sessions for the UK Parliament, and we can see how many days that they sat on average across those, because it goes up and down the way that British politics works. It's not ever set. They were in session on average 160 days a year. So if you have to pay these lords and ladies the same, if we're going to say we're going to give them the same allowance to come live with me, the person that was gifted these lords and ladies, that the government would have to give them to go sit in the chamber, then
please tell me it was more than the maids.
It comes out to a little over $72,000 a year.
Yeah, relative bargain.
But you got 66 of these lords and ladies, Ben. So you factor that in, and so you're paying, it is $4.8 million a year to these lords and ladies. Okay.
You were relentless.
Now, so just all of these people and birds, Ben, the annual upkeep is $7.89 million per year. This is the financial burden that you were given during the 12 days
okay,
of Christmas.
But what about the rings? There were 60 of those.
Oh, there's only 40 rings.
40, sorry.
There's 40 rings. It's a one-time thing, right? It's not a cost. You don't have to maintain it. It's just, this is the only object that you were given during the 12 days of Christmas. You call it 400. The rings that I saw, I would say $450 for like an 18-karat gold, like plain band. So I actually haven't done this math. So it's 450 times the 40. So that actually brings us down a bit. So that's $18,000 off of your $7.9 million annual. Now, here's the other thing that I realized today, and I had to add this on. It's not just maids that you received. It's maids of milking. Okay? So I didn't...
There's some hidden costs in this, Ponzi scheme.
So I didn't factor in what they were milking before. It's just maids. I'm assuming they're milking whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not the noun that you receive. That's just a verb of things that
these are
doing.
Milkmaids. They're employed dairy workers.
That's okay. So what if they came with cows? Did you get cows? Did you get a cow for every maid that you also received? Did every maid come in leading
not beef
a
cows,
dairy cow?
Milking dairy cows.
A dairy cow. Okay. So it costs about $2,000 a year to feed a dairy cow, just in feed and medicine and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? If you, Ben Rich, were to go buy a cow, that's how much you can expect to pay each year to maintain it. Obviously, there's an initial cost. We're not worried about that. They were gifted to us with the maids for some reason. But they're producing milk. Milk is a valuable commodity. You could sell this milk back out into the world and turn a bit of a profit, okay? the average milk cow produces about 6.5 gallons of milk a day. And in bulk sale price from dairies to whoever makes milk, I don't know what you call those things, that's about $1.95 is the bulk sale cost for the raw milk, okay? So that's actually $4,600 and some change dollars that you have coming in from these cows every year. So that offsets their cost. We multiply that out by 40 cows, then you're actually coming in. You're bringing in $105,000 from the cows now. That doesn't factor in the maids, which you're paying the maids a whole lot more to actually milk said cows. But it does offset things a little.
Okay, so what's the grand total? What's the bottom line?
So if we're factoring...
This dude was loaded.
This dude was loaded.
Or he's giving her the worst gift in the history of gifts. So it's all just a giant liability.
The 12 days of Christmas, just the annual upkeep cost, you can expect to pay $7.77 million per year because of the gifts you receive during the 12 days of Christmas.
Perfect. I can't wait to make the infographic for this. On the way back from Salt Lake, the Lego Brick Fest, we were still playing songs about Christmas carols in the car. And my son says, one of the songs we were listening to, they were saying the word Christmas repeatedly. And he kind of wondered out loud, I wonder which Christmas song says the word Christmas more than any other.
Ooh, interesting.
And I said, that's not really one you could Google, but I bet ChatGPT knows. So we asked the artificial intelligence, and it answered, what's your guess, Josh, for the song that says Christmas more than any other?
I want to say the 12 Days of Christmas.
It is! Very well done.
Excellent.
So I wanted to add to your otherwise brilliant and well-researched analysis of that song.
Thanks,
with
Ben.
My cheap AI fact.
You contributed significantly to this conversation.
All right, well, speaking of listening to things, this week I was listening to Jon Stewart's podcast, and he did an interview of Bernie Sanders. Oh. And it was a really interesting interview. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to listen to it. I don't normally listen to that kind of thing, but I enjoyed it. And John rattled off something he considered his he said, this is the way I understand politics in Washington. He rattled off 3 words. He said rules, loopholes, and norms. And then he explained what they meant. He said the rules are the things that can be used as excuses to not do the things you don't want to do.
Okay. Yes, that sounds...
The loopholes are the ways you can get around the rules if you want to. And the norms are what you do with both of those things, what the usual thing is considered to be.
Okay.
And I was like, that was pretty good. I spent a lot of time chewing on that and thinking about that, about areas that have that. Like, for instance, on the military forums I follow on Facebook, a lot of people are talking this week about the fact that they have rules about what colors your socks are supposed to be, even though you can never see your socks.
Yeah, if you're blousing your boots properly, it does not matter.
So the rule is your socks have to be brown or green or black, I think. The loophole is that they can't see them. The norm is you do whatever you want, and as long as you don't get caught, it doesn't matter.
I always wore the socks that I was supposed to wear, but that's just because you can buy them for super cheap in bulk at the BX.
Sure. But did anything come to mind when you think about this rules, loopholes, norms?
You nailed it on the head when it comes to the government thing. Like just working in the military, that was everything. I was a pilot, and our whole life was rules, loopholes, and norms because. I've told this story before. I was going through pilot training for the military, and they gave us all of our publications that we were required to know by law on a CD.
The rule is you have to know all 40,000 pages of this stuff.
And it was a ludicrous amount of unknowable information. But
what's the loophole?
The loophole is, there's a bunch of loopholes. Like if you're the pilot in command, like declaring an emergency. Like I can get away and do whatever I want.
Perfect.
So there's multiple times where people would fly up to an airfield and be like, hey, we want to request to land. And the airfield goes, no, you don't get to land here. They go, okay. And they just hang out just outside of the airspace of the airfield until they're low on gas.
Until they're out of fuel, they declare an emergency.
And land wherever they feel like
it. That's perfect. I love it. Okay. Well, I want this to be a new lens I'm looking at things through, so I'll bring it up again if I see Jon Stewart's rules, loopholes, and norms.
I have a bad at parenting. And this was... okay. All right, Ben. So it's the holiday season. And my favorite holiday is Thanksgiving. And it was great. I spent it with my family, made a wonderful meal, and it was lovely. Then the next morning, November 26th, My wife held her phone with an alarm going off to my face in our bed at 8 in the morning to wake me up and said, "Get up, fool, we're putting up Christmas lights."
Oh, I thought you were going to say we're going to a Black Friday sale.
Oh, absolutely not. Nobody does that anymore. Please. Have you not met my wife? All of our Christmas shopping was done in September.
Online, yes.
Yeah. No, we spent the first 9 hours of that day putting up Christmas lights, and we're just... So our house is bedecked and bedazzled and festive as all get out. So we're putting up these lights, and we're grumpy about it. Every year, Ben, we say, you know what? Next year, this is the year we're going to get those permanent lights that you screw into the eaves of your house, and they're hardcore weatherproofed, like multicolored LEDs you control with your phone. You can change the colors so it can be whatever season, and you're just going to leave them up forever.
I've always wondered how much that costs. Have you priced it out?
We looked at it. It's a few $100s depending on how many of the lights that you want. And
that's less than I thought.
I mean, it's enough that you're not just going to go do it on a whim, but it's cheap enough that it's not something you're going to dismiss out of hand.
Okay.
This has to be a planned purchase. Okay. And so this is the thing. This isn't one of those things where it's like, she asked me the question, well, how much would we need? And it's not like, we'll just get 3 to make sure we've got it. And like, they're expensive. Like, let me go measure, and then we can talk about it. And so this is what I found myself doing last weekend, is we wanted to know, because there was a huge
What time
sale.
did she wake you up to do this?
Well, she woke me up early, like 8 o'clock or something. But it was after a holiday. That was the big deal.
I'm not giving you a hard time about that.
So that was just us. I just want to tell the story because I was griping about it, and that's what got in our heads. We should get the permanent lights. She found some that were on sale, and they came in strings of 150 feet. And so, well, how many do we need? And like I said, I'm not just going to say, oh, well, let's get 2, because they were expensive enough that like just getting another one is like, let's go double check. So I have one of those big, long 100-foot tape measures, the ones that have a little ratchet roll on the side. Yeah. I'm like, well, I'll just measure the house. But you can't just.
Is it rigid or flexible?
Oh, flexible. It's just like a cloth tape, but it's 100 feet long. It's a big one. And so I told my son, hey, come help me. I need another set of hands, basically, to stand here, hold this, and then I run the tape and then do the measurements, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm doing. I'm doing this around the corners of the house and like looking at the eaves. And then at the time, I was also like, oh, this is a good education opportunity. I was like, hey, look up at the house, because we got eaves that go up like a triangle, right? I was like, how much do you think we need to get for that? And he's like, how long is this one? Well, this stretch is 20 feet, but that's not going to be 20 feet. If I got a 20-foot piece of rope and put it up on the triangle,
it would come up short.
It would come up short because we're not measuring the right thing. He's like, we got to get up there and measure? I'm like, I don't want to get up there and measure. Do you? He goes, no. I'm like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. And I got a rake, and I held the rake up to figure out what the height difference was between the bottom of the triangle and the top of the triangle, and I wrote it on a piece of paper. All right, we're going to do some...
You knew 2 sides of a triangle.
That's right. It's like, we're going to do some trigonometry. He's like, what's trigonometry? Trigonometry is the thing that you're probably going to use the most after addition and multiplication when you get out of school.
I'd agree with that.
And so I'm walking him through a squared plus b squared equals c squared to figure out if we have this and this, then what does that mean this is going to be?
You got 2 right triangles back to back, and you can figure out what they are.
You get one hypotenuse, you multiply by 2. Now we got both hypotenuses.
And you know the exact length of the lights you need to cover those eaves.
Oh, mwah, chef's kiss perfect. What do you think, kid? You got it? Carter? When are we going to be done so I can go play video games? And
it's in there. It'll rattle around it.
Ben, it was all right, another time. We have a part of our house that is curved. Okay, it's like a bay window, and it's a quarter of a circle. And so he held the tape against the wall, and I went around the curvature of this thing. I said, okay, how long is that? He goes, oh, it's this far. I'm like, okay, should we get that much? He goes, yeah. And I said, wrong. Look up. The eaves stick away from the house like a foot. It's like, so? I'm like, so? Think about a circle. What happens when you get farther away from the center of a circle? What happens to the circumference? And he goes, can I go back inside? It's kind of cold.
I've had that experience. It's kind of disheartening. You feel like you're having a moment. You think you found a brilliant real-life example that the kid's connecting with, and they're a million miles somewhere else.
And they just could not care less. And, like, I had to... That was one of those dad moments where it's like, kid, I really want to just, like, shake you to pieces right now, but instead I'm just going to say no, and then I'm going to repeat what I said before, and we'll see where it goes.
I just let them go. Every now and then when I have one of those moments and think I failed, they'll come to me later and be like, Dad, I was thinking about that thing you said. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. The human brain's an amazing thing. It saves that for later.
I get that, but I couldn't let him go because I wasn't done measuring the house. I still needed him out there holding the tape measure where I told him to.
Yeah. All right, I got a bat at husbanding for you. So part of me moving into this new house I'm in now, thank goodness, we moved out of my parents' house. And I knew my mom and dad had been gone for 2 months, and we were trying. It turned out that we got our household goods like a week before my parents were supposed to get back. So that gave us a week to basically move into the new house, get all of our stuff out of their house into the new house, and have it all ready to go, and then have their house clean, spick and span, and like we were never there. As a show of appreciation for the fact that they let us stay there for the last year and a half.
Because that's what you do. So did you have a good old-fashioned LDS barn raising where you just fireman lined all of your household goods out of one house and into the new house?
Okay, you put me on a tangent, and I want to take this tangent. Here's what happened. Back in 2010, we bought our first house in Colorado Springs, and we did that. We had an LDS barn raising, but because of the transaction, I had a little bit of extra money, and I hired a work crew to come. So I had volunteers from my church alongside paid employees, and it created this terrible dissonance where the volunteers are like, you have enough money to pay people to come help you? What am I doing here?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And he griped at me to my face about it, and I've never been able to forget it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. You get the sideways looks or whatever, but actually like bringing it up to you, that takes some serious irritation with you, sir. You made him miss a football game.
I know, and I've never been able to forget it. And like I have 3 teenage kids living in my house. So
it's all the work you need.
We just did it. We just did it. So my mom calls me halfway through the week and she says, hey, we just found out one of our friends died and the funeral's going to be on Friday, so we're going to be home 4 days earlier than we told you.
Oh, Mom, no. I'm on too tight a schedule for this. That's not going to work for me.
I almost did that. I was almost like, Mom, you can't come to your house right now. I'm not ready. So I hired maids. I paid them for like a move-out special. Okay. And I pulled the family together and gave them like a coach locker room pep talk. Like, all right, guys, we got 1 day to get all your crap out of this house. So when the maids show up tomorrow, all they have to do is scrub toilets, and then this house is going to shine for the next day when my mom gets back.
Let's put a dog ear on maids for a second. But yeah, keep going.
And I told my mom, I told my wife, I predicted to her exactly what was going to happen when my mom got back. I predicted to her the things she would say, what she would do, the timeline she would be on, all of that. And this was me using my mom simulator. Okay. And then when she got back, the house was clean and spotless and she loved it. And she said all the things that I said. She did all the things she said she would do on the exact timeline that I said she would do them. And after that was all over, my wife comes to me and she's like, Ben, that was uncanny how accurately you predicted what your mom was going to do. And I realized my mom simulator is really good. And I have been married to my wife now longer than I lived in my mother's house. So why is my wife simulator so bad compared to my mom's simulator? That's my question for you.
Okay. My initial knee-jerk answer is that the relationship you have with your wife is far more nuanced than the relationship with your mother.
I think there's also a bit of like Pavlovian psychology going on there in that, like, the nature versus nurture thing. Like, I'm half of my mom's genetics and she raised me.
So you're starting with the same model engine for this simulator.
Yes, exactly. We have the same operating system for all intents and purposes. So I'm not so much running a simulation of my mother is. I'm just thinking what I would do if I were in her situation, and it's pretty close to what she would do.
Why did I try to do a car analogy and you did the computer analogy? That was weird.
Yeah. Okay, so you put a pin in maids.
I put a pin in maids. So this is something that we have because my wife and I both work full-time, and we both acknowledge that we are the kind of person that we are never, ever going to stand up and go, you know what I want to do right now? Vacuum and mop this entire house for free on
so
my
you guys pay
weekend.
somebody else to do it.
So we pay somebody to come in every couple of weeks and do all the...
I assume you call it
stuff.
housekeeping service, and I was curiously referring to them as maids. Is that the problem?
We call... No. No, nothing to do with political correctness. And everything to do with my wife's perception about what maids do.
Oh, I see. I got it. What things are definitely in their domain and what things are out of bounds for them?
Kind of, but not even. It's more of the fact that, like, all right, so the couple of days before, it's like, hey, everybody, the maids are coming on Friday, so start cleaning up. Like, this house needs to be spick and span for when the people that we pay to clean the house show up and clean. Every time, like, I've just accepted it. I'm like, hey, we got to clean up because mommy wants the house clean when the maids show up. And it's so what she will say. And I know, Nicole, you're listening to this right now, and just give me some H of G. You can smack me later, but just, I know her argument is that if there's a bunch of clutter everywhere, that they're not going to be able to get at the things that they need to clean.
Sure. They can't vacuum the floor if there's clothes on the floor.
Okay, that's what she says.
Uh-huh.
I don't buy it.
Does she have you vacuum?
No, we don't vacuum.
Okay, all right.
But what I firmly believe is that she doesn't want to be the messiest house that our housekeepers clean. I honestly think that's what it is.
Huh. Okay, there was this classic episode of The Roseanne Show back in the late 80s, early 90s, where, you know, it's John Goodman and Roseanne are the head of this household. And it was kind of revolutionary for television in that they weren't this tidy upper level family. They were kind of like a middle class family that was a bit crass and dumpy, and they weren't always perfect. And what happened in this episode is they got selected to be a Nielsen family. And by Nielsen family, it meant that they got a box that sat on top of their TV and recorded all of their TV viewing habits and reported that to the Nielsen company that they used for determining the ratings of television shows.
Got it. And so they started putting their finger on the scale.
Exactly. As soon as the box got installed, they're like, we're all going to sit around and watch educational programming instead of the normal trash that we watch. Like, what do you care what Nielsen doesn't care what you're watching. They're just recording it, reporting it to advertisers. So
yeah.
What do you think? There's like a maid network that's like informing on you guys? Like, you wouldn't believe these guys.
I don't feel that way. Like, I know she just wants them to be able to clean the stuff that they're supposed to be cleaning. That's got to be what it is.
You had a bad at husbanding also.
I do have a bad at husbanding. So, Ben, I don't know if you know this, but my hearing is kind of bad. And,
what?
Shut up.
I couldn't help myself.
It took me so long to not... You know how many times people have done that to me, and every time I would just repeat like what I had just last said, not realizing that it was them riffing on me.
I'm glad you finally gotten over it.
Yeah, I finally figured out that anytime anybody asks me to repeat myself, they're just messing with me. Because I can't hear, they can hear me just fine. Apparently I'm loud. Anyway, like it's bad enough to my wife has brought it up enough times that she wanted me to go get my hearing checked. Well, I finally sat down and figured out what my new health insurance, how it works. And I got a new primary care physician and went and got my annual checkup like you do, where I sit in there on a table and they do some things like, so you have any health issues? Nope. Do you eat good? Try to. Do you exercise? Quite a bit. Do you floss? No. Who does? And just going through the whole thing, right? But then she asked me, it's like, oh, is there anything that you're concerned about? And I brought up, okay, well, I've got two things. Like, so one, like, I live in Arizona and I used to be a pool guy. Would you mind taking a look at a couple of spots, making sure that they look okay? Like, oh yeah, they look fine. I can refer you to a dermatologist if you want. I'm like, it's fine. The other thing is, so sometimes my wife might get a teensy bit incredibly annoyed with me because I don't hear what she's saying.
Okay.
And I told her, like, it's not all the time. It's if there's something else that's near me that's happening and she's speaking and maybe I can't make it out, or if we're in a crowded place, I have a hard time hearing the people around me exactly what they're saying.
Yes.
And she's like, okay, well, we can refer you to an audiologist. There's a great ear, nose, and throat place just up the road. You can go there. I was like, okay, great. So they gave me a referral to that. I had a follow-up appointment. And I went to an audiologist to have my hearing checked by
Sat in the booth, wore the uncomfortable headphones, hit the button.
All right, so this is the best hearing test I've ever had. Like, I sat in the refrigerator thing where you close the door and you can like feel your heart beating because it's so quiet in there. And I thought it was that thing where they put the headphones on you and you push the button when you hear the tones. And I didn't hear anything for a very long time. So I was thinking I was doing really bad at this test. And then she came in and did something. I was like, I'm going to check the pressure test of your eardrums. And she put these weird earplugs in that then like made the pressure in my head increase to see if my eardrums were perforated or anything. I'm like, oh, this can't be a good sign. And she's like, okay, I'm going to swap you out to these in-ear headphones, and we're going to try the hearing test again. So she switched me to better earphones for that one. And I did the hearing test again. And then she comes like, okay, we're going to do the bone-conducting headphones and see if you do better on the hearing test. Then I'm like, am I failing that hard? She's like, oh, no, you're fine. Everything's fine.
Lies
and slander. But I'm going through the test, and she comes in and is like, okay, here's your charts. And... well, you're getting older, but you're totally fine. Everything is within normal ranges. You're losing like the top end, the high frequencies. And like she talked to me about what my tinnitus is all about. And like, so everything's fine. So I walked out of there with this clean bill of health, like, there is absolutely nothing for me to worry about. And I came home and I went to my wife and I was like, wife, I went to an audiologist, a paid professional.
Oh no, Josh,
no,
stop.
You saw it before I did. My hearing is fine, just fine. I don't need any hearing aids. And then she turns to me and says, so what, you just don't listen to me? And Ben, it wasn't until that moment I realized the genius trap that my wife had laid for me in this entire scenario. Because yes, either I am deaf and I need hearing aids and professional medical equipment, or apparently I just don't listen to her when she talks.
Woof, walked right into that one.
Well, so here's the thing I did tell her, is this is something that the audiologist told me. And she says, well, and I told her, like, the only person that has said anything about it is my wife. And she goes, very politically correct and very tiptoey about it, like, well, at home, we don't usually have the best speaking habits. And so when I'm at home, I say, 1, walk before you talk. You need to be in the same room. Make sure you are facing the person that you are talking to. And like all the things that you would do to like a stranger that you don't do to like your spouse. Like enunciate clearly with the correct vernacular while you are looking them in the eye, as opposed to mumbling it while you're staring at your phone in the next room while they're doing the dishes. So that's what I came back with. It was not appreciated in the moment.
Oh, man, I'm sorry, buddy. My condolences. That's one of my favorite lines from my favorite movie, Groundhog Day. At the end, when he's walking around, all the strangers on the dance floor are thanking him for all the random favors he did for her during the day. One lady goes, oh, and thank you for fixing Felix's back. He can finally help out with chores around the house again. And he goes, my condolences, Felix. All right, Josh, you and I are going to kind of take a little bit of a heavy dip here. We'll call this Bad at Society. So I sent you an article this week from The Atlantic called How a Liberal America Came to Its Senses. The bit that the point that the author was making is that we've kind of had this cultural thing for about the last decade and a half called cancel culture. And he's saying that perhaps the election of Donald Trump marks the end of cancel culture.
No, so
go ahead.
This is the problem. Like, you sent me this thing and wanted to talk about it, and I was getting like just this whole thing is subverted and laced with words that have been co-opted by both sides, and it's like you just said, like, oh, cancel culture is over. Like, okay, cancel culture is a word that the right came up with to yell at the left because the left was getting upset that people were being overtly racist and sexist in public and not having to take any accountability for it. Like, it's not... All right, so this was the fundamental assumption that this author had going in this article, is this was a bad thing. Like, oh, this is just terrible. People should, like... And I get it, like, my first read on it was, what has this guy said that's so overtly racist, or what does he want to say?
He wants permission to be racist and sexist again.
That's the way I read it the first time I read it. Going back, giving him some H of G, okay, I can kind of get that, like, maybe we should all just be a little bit nicer to each other. That's, instead of condemning somebody for one poor judgment. So, okay, If that's the message he's trying to get across, okay, I'm fine. But Ben, it does not read that way. It reads like ding dong, the witch is dead, the left lost, screw all those guys.
Yeah, kinda. I don't even know that. I didn't do a lot of research on the background of this particular author and see, if he was in a position where that be what he was trying to say. The way I contextualized this was I was like, okay, so what's the form here? The form is that there's this trend in society where there's all the soft, non-governmental, non-political mechanisms that happen to control behavior, whatever they are, in the context of the time and place and technology and relationships and society that they exist in.
So the social contracts we keep talking about.
Yes. What did this look like a long time ago? I was thinking like the 1950s. What were the things that were not okay to say in the 50s or do or be? And
communist.
How did...
It was not okay to be communist.
The Red Scare. Yeah. Great example. Great example. But aside from McCarthyism, where there was a senator in the United States Senate that was actually holding tribunals and trials and dragging people before magistrates, what was happening in the country? What were the mechanisms people used? Did they exclude people from their social groups? Did they not let their kids play at each other's houses? Did they, what are the mechanisms on our console and buttons and dials for telling people what kind of things are not acceptable to do or say? What was it like back then? Use your imagination, whatever they are. I don't want to try to enumerate them here.
Yeah, I was hoping you were actually asking me
No, I'm not actually asking that question. What I'm asking is, take that idea that a society has a group of things that they consider to be acceptable at the time and that they try to enforce the norms on people. Rules, loopholes, and norms.
Well, there you go.
And there may be a time where you like it. You agree with it, and you're okay with society doing the things that they do to try to force people to conform to the rules and the norms. Maybe you don't, and maybe society's forcing you to conform to rules and norms that you don't like and you don't think are good. Is it only okay when you like what the rules and norms are?
And so this is the problem with this nuanced conversation, is that the way that you are posing this question is the way that this author was taking this cancel culture or wokeness philosophy. Anybody that wasn't lockstep with our ideology got canceled, or like they get bombarded on social media until their employer fired them. And he quoted, cherry-picked a couple of instances where that exact thing happened.
He picked some examples where that same, yeah.
Here's the problem. I don't know of anybody getting canceled for saying anything that wasn't overtly racist or misogynistic. That's the issue, is that, yes, the way that you phrased it and the way that he phrased it, or they phrased it, I don't know the gender of the author. I shouldn't assume it's a male. That's male default thinking. Shame on me. The way that it was phrased is that this is an inherently bad thing. We should all give each other a little bit more slack and leeway. That principle I can agree with and understand, but not here. Like, what you're talking about is specifically aimed at sexism and racism. Why are you defending that?
Yeah, and I definitely wasn't defending that, and I don't think he was either. I think it was more like you said, the idea of giving other people hermeneutics of generosity. So about the same time I read that article, I saw this Instagram short, and I sent you the Instagram short. It was a guy in the woods chopping wood, and a girl comes to him, and she's like, "We need you to come back." He's like, "But you told me to be quiet and take a back seat." And she's like, "Well, we want you to be part of the conversation again." He's like, "Okay, but I got some things I want to say." And he listed off a few. I'll put a link to the short in the show notes.
Please don't. It's a bunch of stuff that we don't say anymore for good reason. Like, it's a bunch of
make up your own mind, listeners. But it was the same idea. He's like, I want you to think about what I'm trying to say instead of the words that I used and telling me that I'm not okay.
No, this is my problem right there. This is the problem. Listen to what I'm trying to say instead of the words I use. Okay, use different words. If you're trying to get across your point, we have all, and then a wall of people come and say, "Hey, we're not comfortable. We understand your point, but you're using the wrong words. Those words aren't okay to use anymore. Use different words." What is your problem with using different words?
But that's my point. how come a group of people gets to decide what kinds of words are okay and what aren't, and then they have the rights to enforce their opinions on me or someone else? I think we're better off when that isn't the case.
You do the same thing all the time. If there was somebody at this, if you went to the choir thing and the person stood up in front of the thing and started swearing like a sailor, you would take issue with that, and then you would ask them to change their words. Like, oh, hey, don't listen to my words, listen to what I'm saying. Like, it's the same thing, Ben. Like, just because your threshold is different doesn't mean that it's wrong.
I don't know that I would agree with what you said about what your assumption about what I would do. So one of the things that's a regular cultural practice in my church is on the first Sunday of each month we have what's called a testimony meeting, which is like open mic night, basically, where they don't have a planned sermon and anybody that wants to can go up to the podium and talk stuff. And there's a lot of rules, norms, and rules, loopholes, and norms about this. But sometimes you get somebody up there that really is violating too many of them. You can see people squirming in their seats, or the person up there is talking too freely about kind of things they're not supposed to talk about. And for the most part, we just bite our tongues and sit there and listen to them. Maybe uncomfortably, but you don't get canceled. Because there's these competing values. There's our rules and norms about what you can and can't say up there. And then there's the other value of letting people have their own ideas and say what they think and be free to express themselves. And those two things are sometimes at odds. And I don't think it's okay to just be able to be like, no, you're canceled.
Well, all right, so first of all, you're saying that as if there's a mechanism where there's a control center somewhere. Like, I don't like what he said. He hits a button and that person, now their life is destroyed. That's not a thing. There has to be a tidal wave of people that all agree that this person is completely out of line before anything bad manifests in this person's life.
Yes. The way we get to George Orwell 1984, though, is going too far down this path of deciding that we can control what words they use and what's okay to think.
Okay. Flip side of that coin. If somebody is up on the podium saying stuff that is completely and utterly out of line, I want to have a mechanism that works that is to shut them down. Like, if like, it goes both ways, right? You don't like that's accusatory. I shouldn't say the word you. The right doesn't like this whole cancel culture thing because, I want to be able to say the things that I want to say. Well, what do you want to say that's so offensive that you're worried about getting canceled now? That's my counter question to that.
Okay. Are you familiar with this sketch on what's it called? The Weekly News on Saturday Night Live, where a couple of guys that
Weekend
dressed
update.
up.
Yeah.
Weekend Update. Have you seen the sketch that Michael Che and Colin Jost do on Weekend Update, where they write jokes for each other and they don't see them until they're right in front of the camera and they have to read them?
I have seen those, yes.
So one of them, it's a great bit. It's very versatile. They do a lot of different things with it. But one of the things they tend to do with it is these two are obviously very good friends. One guy's a white guy, one guy's a black guy, and they tend to write racist jokes that would be inappropriate for the person of the opposite race to say for each other, to get surprised with having pop up in front of them on a teleprompter and have to read them to the audience.
Right.
And I realized that this is a really good lens to examine this. And they know this. That's how they leverage the humor, because humor is all about surprise and questioning our norms and stuff. And when Michael Che writes a racist joke for Colin to say, or vice versa, and they just read it off because that's the rule. Sometimes they'll even say under their breath, "You're gonna get me. You're gonna get me in trouble."
All right. So
But that's about saying the forbidden words in a way that's showing that clearly their intent isn't the bad thing that we tend to associate with those forbidden words.
That's fair. But I think that's the exception and not the rule. Most of the time when people are using words that they shouldn't be using, they're using it in a way they shouldn't be using it.
I got it. But how do we know what someone's intent is if all we're doing is policing their words?
This is the problem. Is I think we both agree that a middle ground here is correct, because
you're right. You shouldn't just be able to say anything you want.
But at the same time, you shouldn't be threatened with your life being upended because you spoke in anger, or
you or even accidentally said a forbidden word.
Accidentally, clear up your vocabulary.
No,
but here's,
Josh, if we're going to be clear about not assuming someone's intent, think about what happened to Mitt Romney when he said we have binders full of women. Like that comment got blown so out of proportion.
I get it, but there are some things that cross a line. Like the N-word should not be in your active vocabulary freaking anywhere at any time. There's no accidental use of that. So I'm going to reserve the right to say there are exceptions to what you just said. So we agree there's a middle ground to this whole thing. My problem with this is it feels, this article specifically that you sent me felt almost weaponized in that, like, aha, we beat them. Those stupid leftists like broke themselves across this whole thing, and now they have to suffer the wrath of their own.
Yeah, again, I don't even know if this writer was a right-wing pundit.
Absolutely,
maybe he's left.
There's no chance. Absolutely no chance. The thing is scathing in everything it says about this.
I just don't know. It's a publication that's known for being liberal in its editorialism.
They picked it's clearly biased to the right, clearly biased to be conservative. What are we actually talking about? Why is this so hard? Because it's such a nuanced thing, and we want to boil it down because that's what our natural instincts are, right? Should we give each other a little more grace? Yes, we should. But at the same time, you don't just get to stand on a podium because everybody. If there's one bad thing about social media is that it gave everybody a platform, and Ben, not everybody should have a platform. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm looking
that connects it back what I was saying. In the 50s, if you said something people didn't like, they didn't invite you to their party. But now they can eviscerate you on the internet in front of everyone.
Or the guy that everybody knows, racist uncle, whatever. Oh, he's just a nut job. We just ignore him. That guy can now reach millions of people with his YouTube channel and get subscribers and funding and people that will die for him. And I'm looking at you, flat earthers. Get over it. It's a sphere.
I don't believe in flat earthers.
Ugh, they're real. This is you not believing in them gives them more power. Doesn't matter. Okay, so but the internet has given us all a platform, and not everybody uses it the way that it should be. Nicki Minaj chiming in on whether or not COVID vaccines were viable medical treatment.
That was a classic callback. Link in the show notes to that episode where we talked about that.
It's shut up. You have no dog in this fight. That's the kind of thing I want there to be, some kind of social mechanism to shout those idiots down. There has to be, because there are way more idiots out there with platforms than there are people that know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I wish I think we're arriving at where we always do with this this is a complicated problem, a wicked problem even. and one of the characteristics of wicked problems is they defy even understanding the problem, let alone coming up with a solution. So
and this is and again, we're also putting words on a thing. This wasn't a movement that happened. This wasn't an orchestrated thing. This is just it just
nebulous
happened.
Societal.
It was an organic
zeitgeist.
Side byproduct of a social media backlash. And this is things that employers have to be worried about now. If you have been hired at a job anytime in the recent past, you have to sign and read a social media policy that the company has. Hey, you're working here. You don't get to trash us up and down on your social media feeds. This is how it works.
And those are the formal mechanisms, but mostly what we're trying to talk about is the informal ones, and who controls those? Nobody. Everybody.
And that's the thing. The left is weaponizing this wokeness. No, we're not. It's just a bunch of people that got sick of people saying crap that they shouldn't be saying. This isn't a movement. This isn't an organization. We don't have a CEO of wokeness. This is just a bunch of people hey, we should be better than this.
Well said. I'm going to go first about what I'm reading today because you're going to give me a hard time about it, so I'm just going to take it up front. So I mentioned 2 or 3 episodes ago how I went with my daughter to the Utah State Capitol for the Utah State Victims of Communism annual observance of moment of silence, of respect and memorialism and all that. One of the speakers, the lady that started the whole thing, talked about how a lot of her thought and reasoning behind setting this day up came from a book called The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So I put it in my reading queue, and that's what I'm reading right now. This book won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Some have called it the most important book of the 20th century. Some say it's behind the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism. So it's not an understatement to call this an important book, but I had never heard of it before, and I was kind of embarrassed that I hadn't. Alexander Solzhenitsyn spent 11 years in the Gulag in Russia, and he was relatively well-educated and eventually got out and fled Russia and was determined to expose all of this in a time when people weren't talking about it because they were afraid of the communist regimes. So he didn't just tell his own story. He gathered as many stories as he could and published them all in Russian in 3 volumes that were like 1,800 pages. I'm not reading that version of it. I'm reading the abridged English translation that's only like 700 pages. So
okay, it's
intense. I'm not going to lie. He just dives right in with like, he's just telling you what happened. So he starts off with arrest. Like if for whatever reason, the regime decides you're a threat, they arrest you. Oh my gosh. It's so harrowing to listen to these accounts of arrest because this was at a time when like they hadn't fully established their power base. He's going back to like the late 19-teens to late 1930s. And this was Stalin just saying, I think this group is a threat, and telling his cronies to do something about it. And they would just go out, find him in a public place, sidle up to him and be like, hey, why don't you come over here and talk to us for a minute? He gave an anecdote of a woman that when they tried to arrest her and apprehend her on the street, she grabbed onto a light pole and started screaming. And a crowd started to form, and the agents disappeared and showed up at her house that night after dark, and she disappeared.
Yeah, that's...
They didn't want to fight. They didn't want a public trial. And in the Soviet justice system at the time, they considered a personal confession to be the premier form of evidence for determining guilt. And there's no exclusions for if a confession was obtained under duress. So they routinely would just apprehend whoever they wanted, torture them until they confessed, and consider it a full carriage of justice.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
And he writes down every form of torture they used, and it is insane. So that's where I'm at in the book right now. I'm in the middle. I've gotten through all the accounts of arrest. I'm into all of the accounts of torture. And yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Yeah, you're giving me anxiety. Like listening to, like third hand, you describe it.
It's definitely anxiety inducing, and I definitely feel like reading these kinds of things is important. It's the old "those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it" kind of thing. Like these were things that this regime, this very powerful regime, went to great lengths to suppress and make sure never got written down. And the fact that this one guy wrote it down may have contributed to the fall of that entire way of government. And that's how important knowing about this stuff is.
Whew. It's intense.
Okay.
I feel like I should probably read that, but my reading queue is full, Ben. It's just full.
All right. Well, what are you reading right now, Josh?
So I love how listeners peek behind the curtain here. We have show notes. We keep in a shared OneNote somewhere on the internet, and Ben has autofilled mine. It says Josh, and a blank space by Brandon Sanderson. Like, he just knows that's what's happening.
Is it true?
It's absolutely
You're still reading
true.
Oathbringer.
I'm still in Oathbringer because this is like a 50-hour book, and I'm listening it at 1.2. I think I'm listening at 1.2.
So we're both reading 50-hour books. We're the same.
I'm at 1.15. I've got 10 hours left, and this is a good one. Obviously the books are the massive world fantasies and just crazy hard magic systems and just the best from start to finish. But each one of the books in this series specifically is characterized by Brandon Sanderson taking a deep dive into one of the main characters of the series and really making you understand what makes them tick. And this one, it's Dalinar. And so Dalinar is he's the general. He is the guy in the first book that's like the only person that tells the truth and stands up and does what he says. And
you had me read The Way of Kings, and he was my favorite character.
Yes. He's the guy, and he's like, this is clearly the good guy. This book is full of bad guys, and there's the good guy, and it's Dalinar. And Ben, we get to learn about Dalinar's past in this book, and holy crap, to call him a bloodthirsty warmonger is the understatement of the century. This guy tore people to pieces with his bare hands on the regular. He would get into such a battle lust, he would slaughter hundreds of dudes by himself with his power armor and his 7-foot-long sword, including his own dudes. Just whole fields of whoever got in his way just ended up dead at his feet.
This is an interesting trope they like to play in these kind of epic fantasies where you have a character that's being upheld as somebody peaceful, but the people around him that know kind of go, yeah, but you used to not be like that.
And we get that through this book because he's having these other interactions with this, basically a priest that's in his circle. And we find out that this priest was like one of his lieutenants under him during this time. And the stuff that Dalinar did drove this guy to be a priest. Like, I am no longer a soldier. I don't want any piece of this. I'm giving up all my worldly possessions and dedicating my life to the Lord. That is how bad the things I just saw are. And it's just going through his life and his transformation. What got him to be that? Because the start of this, he's just this rampaging animal. But you know where he ends up. You're like, how does he make this transformation? And he goes through this massive broken depression and just this hardcore alcoholism and like all the it's riveting, and it's so connecting. It makes us feel like a real person.
This makes me think of Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot. Do you remember that one? Where he like had fought in the...
We can't talk about Mel Gibson. He got canceled.
And they kind of show him as fighting as this noble revolutionary fighting against the British, but anyone that knows him remembers before when he helped slaughter the Native Americans or whatever. I don't know, something he did in the Civil War.
It was the French and Indian War.
That Civil War couldn't happen yet. They hadn't started the country.
Between what is that movie? Patriot, and then the movie where he was the Scotsman. What was that called?
Braveheart.
Between Braveheart and The Patriot, Mel Gibson's like favorite pastime is killing English people.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, you've persuaded me, Josh. I think I may read this because I love that kind of thing.
Oh man, I'm so looking forward to the next book in the series. Like, this is book 3. I still have to read book 4, and book 5 came out like a week ago. And it's all so good. It's all so good. I already told you about how I cried in Words of Radiance. This one, I know the scene that's going to get me moved. That I'm going to sit in my car because it's going to happen either on my way to or way back from work. And I'm just going to sit in my car and I'm going to listen to it. And I'm going to have a good cry when he gets to the part where he's talking about spoilers, everyone, for Oathbringer. Because you learn all this backstory about Dalinar and what's weighing him down and how a broken person he is and how he barely picked himself up and put himself back together. And then this literal god of emotion shows up. It's like, oh, just be my champion. I will take all the pain away. You will not feel guilt. You will not feel pain. You will not feel regret for anything that you have done. You will just continue to kill for me. And Dalinar screams at him, you can't have my pain. If I don't feel pain, that means I can't become a better person. And like it's obviously far more eloquent and more dramatic than what I just portrayed, but it's so moving when it happens.
Nice. All right, Josh. One of our listeners on our Patreon, and thank you to all of our listeners that support us on Patreon, requested that we revisit something we did a long, long time ago when we did our Bad at Magic version of the game show Mastermind. Mastermind is a British television quiz show created for the BBC that basically is this intimidating setting where they're asking you questions in a timed environment, and one of the characteristics of it is that you, the person being quizzed, gets to choose the subject matter area that they are going to quiz you on. So along that line, Josh and I decided we could do another Mastermind episode, and we both exchanged topics. Josh told me that he wanted his topic to be rules of Magic the Gathering.
Ben told me his topic was going to be the history of Christian Christmas. And we couldn't be any different in the topics that we picked for this episode, first of all. And then second, if you are a Patreon subscriber, like, you're the best. Like, we love you so much. Like, you're just fantastic. Thank you. And screw you for making us go back to this Mastermind episode. Anybody that listens to this podcast knows that Ben is the one that does all the hardcore research and sits down and prepares. And I'm just the guy that rolls in here and just shoots snarky comebacks at him the whole time. I had to sit down and research.
Yeah, this requires work.
Ben's the expert in this. I'm not. I had to come up with questions to stump him. That's not fair.
Oh, stump. Okay, so that wasn't necessarily my goal here. I also
Oh.
was thinking of our listeners while I was writing these questions. So, Josh, do you want to go first or you want me to go first? Let's alternate questions.
Well, I'll take questions. Ben, I think you should go first. And yes, I asked Ben, like, I struggled with this one because my knowledge base is a mile wide and an inch deep. I know a little bit about a lot of random nonsense. But I don't know a whole lot about specific things like, oh, Ben, I want you to quiz me on the generally accepted accounting principles used in the United States. All of 7 people will appreciate that.
Riveting podcast listening, folks.
Yeah, exactly. So, no,
okay.
Back to games, life, and other things. I've said multiple times this podcast, I was the de facto judge wherever I end up. So that's, all right, put my money where my mouth is.
All right, apologies in advance that not all of these are rules questions because I didn't think listening to 10 rules questions would be, like I said, riveting podcast listening. So, Josh, name 2 of the original Elder Dragon legends from Magic's lore and the set they were introduced in.
Ooh, oh, you jerk. Okay, I know all of them. Dramoka, Nicol Bolas, easily those are 2. So these were back in the day.
You've gotten one so far.
What? Dramoka is not one of the Elder Dragons? Oh, that's the green-white from Carns of Tarkir. Crap.
Nicol Bolas is one. Okay, hint, there's 5. I'm only asking you for 2.
I know there's 5. I know the Bant one because I want to make him my commander for a bunch of times. It's the white, blue, and the green one. He has to do with toughness. Crap, what is his name?
You just need one more.
I know. As soon as you say it, I'm going to beat my head against the desk because I know what the word is. Like, give me the name of the Bant one.
I don't have that in front of me. I'd have to look them up. Well, you're going to know the answer. Wait. Before you do that, you need to answer the second part of the question.
Oh,
what set were they introduced in?
The cop-out would be Legends, but it probably isn't Legends. Or
Correct.
Is it Legends? It is Legends. Ha ha ha.
Okay, so you got Nicol Bolas and Legends, so you got 2 out of 3 parts of a correct answer.
Dang it. All right, so I will say Nicol Bolas is my favorite bad guy in Magic history. Like, he's just, I can't, there's so many specific story moments that happen with Nicol Bolas that just epitomize him as this guy is out of everyone's league.
These names are ridiculous. I can't. Arcades Sabbath, Chromium, Palladium Ors, Vevictus Asmati, and Nicol Bolas.
I knew that first one. So it's Arcadis. Is that what it was?
Yeah, Arcadis Sabbath.
I knew that was the one. He's the Bant one, isn't he?
I guess, if that sounds familiar. I didn't go that far.
Fair enough. They reprinted all of them in slightly different. So the original, those 5 dragons, like, mechanically, they're garbage. They were terrible. Legends was an awful set. It never should have been printed. But they've since been reprinted with different flavor. And they're all have their own little spin on what they do, and they're all really cool.
All right. Well, you get 2/3 credit on that one. All right, my turn.
Yes, I have questions for you, Ben. And these are about Christmas. No particular order. So I'm going to start off with the cheeky one. I had to do it to you. What ancient Roman festival is believed to have influenced the celebration of Christmas?
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Ben. All right, so it's cheeky because one of the things that Ben says, like, oh, I want to be quizzed on Christmas. And I immediately responded with, I'm just going to bombard you with questions about how Christmas has been co-opted from 1,000 different cultures, right? So I'm not going to actually do that to you, but this one I had to get at least one in. So Christmas as an amalgamation of holidays, the first, the primary one was instituted by the Romans, and that was Saturnalia. Which was the ancient festival of the sun god Saturn.
Okay,
whatever.
Great.
Like, it happened in winter time, and everybody celebrated the light. Like, it was the transition from the Roman Empire to the Holy Roman Empire.
Is that the one where the trees comes from?
That is not the one where the trees come from.
Okay, maybe that's one of my other questions, so I don't want to get ahead of it. Here's your second question. If you control a Tarmogoyf and a Wrath of God is cast, assuming no other cards in the graveyards, what are Tarmogoyf's power and toughness when it is put into the graveyard?
When it is put into the graveyard. So you're asking me, when is Wrath of God put into the graveyard, like, as a part of it being cast?
Yeah, pretty much.
So Tarmogoyf will die. My understanding, and I'm probably going to be wrong, Tarmogoyf will die as a 1/2 because there will be a sorcery card in the graveyard as he dies.
He also counts himself. So he's a 2/3.
He counts himself, even though he's not in the graveyard yet. That I didn't know. He was a 2/3. Okay, you got me. But yes, the Wrath of God is put into the graveyard as a part of its resolution, so it's there when it kills stuff.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In what country did the Christmas tree originate?
I'm going to go easy here and say I think it came from Germany.
Correct, sir. It did come from Germany.
All right. Explain the conflict at the heart of Dominaria Block and its connection to the Weatherlight saga.
I asked for magic rules. You're asking me like the Vorthros stuff. Like which Dominaria Block? The original one or the new one?
The new one.
The new one. Okay. So, okay, the Weatherlight saga was back in the day when Magic was a game. They had like a cast, they had a crew. What am I saying? They had a big story that was the Artifacts block back in the day with Urza and Mishra, and they blew up the world, and that was Dominaria, and then Urza became the first Planeswalker and pissed off whatever, it's fine. But then Urza left all of these super powerful artifacts around, and one of them was the Weatherlight, which was this airship, and there was a bunch of other things, including Squeeze Toy. But anyway, there was this essentially pirate crew of misfits that were assembled that were flying around.
Kind of a fun story.
And they went from place to place trying to get Urza's legacy, they called it, all of these things together. And once they had it all together, it turned into the legacy weapon, which was a really stupid artifact at the time. But anyway, that was the story.
So in Dominaria Block...
In the new Dominaria Block, yes. So the conflict of the new Dominaria Block was the Phyrexians are coming back, and they're these sleeper agents that they're discovering. They're like, Phyrexia being essentially the Borg of the Magic the Gathering world. Everyone was afraid that they were going to come back, and Teferi was the biggest one because he famously phased out his entire plane of origination and couldn't get it back.
And who was the kingpin of the Phyrexians during this conflict?
Oh, that was her name's Mom. What's her actual name? Everybody just calls her freaking Mom. It's the white one. It's one of the Praetors.
It's not Elish
Norn. It's not Elish Norn? Okay, so during Dominaria Block, then it would have had to have been Jin Gitaxias?
It was Yawgmoth.
Oh, Yawgmoth.
I'm going to give you full credit for this one, though, because you got the Weatherlight, the Phyrexians, and the Legacy Weapon, so well done.
One of my favorite things... All right, tangent, you got me on story time, and I told my son this, and he loves it too. One of the crew members on the Weatherlight was Squee, the goblin. Okay, he's just a goblin, just this
Goblin Nabob.
No, not at the time he wasn't. He became the Goblin Nabob, which is like king of the goblins, because one of the things that he found on the boat, he's just a cabin boy, and he found this little ball, and he liked it, and he called it his toy. It's Squeeze Toy. There's a card called Squeeze Toy. What Squee didn't realize is this was one of Urza's artifacts that made him immortal as long as he was holding it. And so all of Squee's cards have something to do with him coming back from the graveyard because he can't be killed.
Huh. Interesting. All right, give me my third one.
Okay. And what year did Christmas become a federal holiday in the United States?
Ooh, I like this. I want to say it was in the 20th century. I'm going to guess 1908.
Ooh, that is close, but no cigar. All right. You want me to give you the answer? I have bonus questions. Yeah. Okay, so it became a U.S. federal holiday in 1870. But what do you think? But now, just like American politics, there's the federal government and then there's the states.
Which president was president then?
Which state do you think adopted Christmas as a holiday first?
Delaware, the first state.
It was actually Alabama in 1836. A full, 24 years before, 34 years before it became a federal holiday. What do you think the last state to adopt Christmas was?
Well, I mean, a lot of states didn't exist in 1870. So let's say Hawaii.
The last state to adopt Christmas was Oklahoma in 1907, which was really close to what you said was 1908.
Yeah, well, Hawaii and Arizona and Alaska didn't exist in 1907, so that's technically right. They were the last. But all right,
so I guess they were last because they were just last to be states.
Yeah,
you're technically correct. Which is
the best kind of correct. All right, Josh. Here's another rules question for you. Feel free to look these cards up in the card database of your choice. During your upkeep, you control a Phyrexian Arena and Underworld Dreams. Explain the sequence of triggers and the outcome for both you and your opponent.
Ooh. All right, so Underworld Dreams is an enchantment that says whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to that player. And Phyrexian Arena says at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose 1 life. And this is the beginning of my upkeep?
Yep.
Okay. So Phyrexian Arena doesn't draw my opponent a card. So the only thing that's going to happen is at the beginning of my upkeep, I'm going to get a Phyrexian Arena trigger that goes onto the stack. Then priority goes around. Like, I have a chance to respond to the Phyrexian Arena trigger. My opponent has the opportunity to respond to the Phyrexian Arena trigger. If neither of us do, then the stack resolves one thing at a time, and then priority goes around again. So, are you sure it's Phyrexian Arena in this question?
Read Underworld Dreams again.
Whenever an opponent draws a card.
I wonder if that got errated.
Phyrexian.
All right, you got it.
So theoretically, if either Phyrexian Arena, maybe it's Howling Mine. Maybe it's supposed to be Howling Mine.
Yeah. So you're both drawing a card. So what order did the triggers go on the stack, and what happens?
Yes. So what would happen? Let's say Phyrexian Arena or whatever, it was replaced with an effect that drew both players a card.
I'm so bad at the rules, I'm not even good at asking questions about the rules. You know what? We should name this podcast Bad at Magic.
That's a good name for a podcast. I wonder if it's available. We should trademark that while we can. All right, so let's assume Phyrexian Arena or some other effect draws both players a card at the beginning of the upkeep. So, beginning of the upkeep, that trigger goes on the stack that says both players draw a card. Again, a round of priority goes. If nobody responds to anything, then that trigger happens, and both players draw a card. Now, Underworld Dreams puts a trigger on the stack that says the opponent who just drew a card takes 1 damage. And then again, priority goes around. We're still in the upkeep. I'm the active player. I get priority first. I can respond to the trigger. If I don't, my opponent gets the opportunity to respond to the trigger. If he doesn't, the trigger resolves, and he takes 1 damage.
Well done. You get a point.
That was so nerdy. There's going to be like 6 people that love that and 100 people that don't. All right. So let's go a little biblical. Let's see if we can save you from the bad questions that I'm asking you so far. All right. So famously, Christmas is about the birth of Jesus. So why? But and all of the things that go around with that. But why were Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem in the first place?
Okay, great. Mary and Bethlehem were traveling to Bethlehem because the Jewish form of taxation at the time was that you had to return to your home of origin and pay taxes there. So that was where Joseph was from. They were going back there to pay taxes.
I'll give you full credit because I have 2 different answers because famously there's multiple versions of the Bible. So some scholars say it was to participate in a census that was ordered by the Roman emperor at the time. And like you said, you have to go back to the city of your birth in order to be part of the census. The King James version of the Bible says that they traveled back there to be taxed, which is the more prevalent one that they were
maybe
going back
both.
to be taxed. Maybe both.
So, why take a census if that isn't what it's for?
Full credit, sir. Well done.
All right. Here's your next question. What was the first Magic set to introduce foil cards, and in what year?
Ooh. Oh, I'm going to fail this so hard. I'm going to go with, it was very early in Magic's. It's got to be very early because they had the old style card art. So that was all the way up until Fifth Dawn, which came out in 2005. I'm going to say that I have no idea what the set was, but I'm going to say the first foil happened in 1999.
Correct.
Nice.
It was Urza's Legacy.
Urza's Legacy. Okay. Excellent.
Well done.
Ooh, that was a good block for foils to come out too, because there was a bunch of nonsense cards that destroyed the game.
It's funny because I think 5th edition was one of the first core sets to have it, and some really bland and they were so rare the way they put them into packs back then that if you can get a 5th edition pack and open it up and you have a foil in it, it's easily worth like 100 times what that same card is in regular.
Okay. Well, a lot of those cards only cost 2 cents, so
right, but then it's worth $2. And if it's worth $20, it's worth $400.
That is true. There are a lot of cards in the Urza's set that are worth a ton of money. Okay. Oh, tangent. We had our holiday party, our office holiday party, where we did a Secret Santa gift exchange.
Uh-huh.
And the person that drew my name for the Secret Santa was the other guy that plays Magic in the office. And which was perfect. As soon as he says, like, oh, I've got Josh, I was like, yes, I'm going to get something I actually want. And yeah, he got me 6 packs of Magic cards. Everybody's like, "What is that?"
Nice.
I was stoked about it, and I thanked him profusely. But everyone else was like, "What are those?" Like, and I held them up and I went,
"This is obviously lost on you, but I like it."
I said, "These are lottery tickets. Okay, there could be hundreds of dollars in here." There wasn't. We opened complete trash.
Okay, so I did the same thing. We had a White Elephant gift exchange. The price limit was $25, and if you remember, as part of our entry fee gifts in Vegas, they gave us a bunch of packs, and I hadn't opened mine. Oh, so I had one of the Duskmorn collector's boosters that had come with my entry fee, and those are going for $25 right now.
Yes, they are.
The reason they're going for $25 is there's 5 cards in there that are worth over $80 each, and one of them's worth $200. Ooh. So I wrapped mine up real nice and put it in the gift exchange. But this was the kind where we weren't assigned a person. It was just you drew a lottery number, then you could go draft one. My gift went very last because no one understood. I just wrapped a ribbon around it so you could see it was a Duskmorn Collector's Booster. So as the last person went up to kind of sheepishly pick up the one remaining gift, I stood up and I'm like, okay, obviously no one gets what's happening here, but he could open that pack of Magic cards right there and have a $200 card inside. And everyone was like, why didn't you tell us sooner?
That's a lottery ticket. Think of this as a lottery ticket.
I don't actually know what was in it. He didn't open it yet, so
that jerk. Well,
maybe he got it. I don't know.
This is just like our friend that got robbed in Vegas, and like the guy took the $15 out of his
wallet.
Yeah, that was sitting next to his like $2,000 vintage deck.
Yeah.
Boy.
All right, whose turn is it? Is it? It's your turn to ask me one.
It's my turn to ask you one. That is correct. Okay. This is a 2-part question. First part's easy. Second part's very hard. This is why I broke it into 2 parts. Okay. All right, Ben. True or false? Christ was born on December 25th.
Okay. What's the second part? Do I have to answer the first part?
Yeah, answer the first part first.
False.
False. That is correct. The answer is false. Now, this is the hard part. What Bible verse is quoted as evidence that Christ was not born on December 25th?
Okay. This is a heritage hobby horse for my family. My dad is a prodigious amateur astronomer, and he has determined through concrete astrological evidence the exact date of Jesus' birth. And I think it was because of there's evidence in a lot of places, but I think maybe the verse you're asking about is the one talking about the shepherds in the fields watching their flocks.
That is exactly the verse that I'm referring to. I'm giving you full marks for that one.
Great.
So it was Luke 2:8, and there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Well, famously, the rainy season in Palestine starts in mid-October, and sheep would have been kept in their pens at that time.
Woohoo! All right, here's your next question. Since we established this already, this is your favorite. Who is Nicol Bolas, and what role does he play in Magic's overarching storyline?
Oh, I love this so much. All right, podcast over. I just get to rant about Nicol Bolas for the next 45 minutes. Okay, so Nicol Bolas is one of the Elder Dragons, and he was one of the Planeswalkers. And so when the game started, it was spun as if, like, you the player, are a Planeswalker. That's the level of power we're talking about. And so Nicol Bolas being a card in the game that was also a Planeswalker was unbelievable. Nicol Bolas's whole thing, like, he was just this puppet master. And like he was just... Planeswalkers at the time famously would create entire universes for them to just hang out and piss around in. And...
You've gotten 2 of the 3 things so far already.
You asked me a question? I was just talking about
an Elder Dragon. He's a Planeswalker. What's his primary motivation? What's he trying? Why is he the antagonist in many of the story arcs?
All right, he's the antagonist in the story arcs because of the Time Spiral block, which I was getting to next. So Time Spiral block happened, and it all fundamentally altered the way that Planeswalkers and the Planeswalker Spark worked in the Magic the Gathering universe and depowered it a lot. Instead of being gods, they were just very powerful wizards, usually. And Nicol Bolas took that personally. No, sir, I'm a god, and I'm going to continue to be a god. And so he manufactured this multi-planet scheme where he was assembling these pieces that he needed to kick off what culminated in the War of the Spark, a story that I have documented evidence on this podcast I'm trying to force down your throat for years now as being amazing, because Nicobolus shows up to Ravnica, all right, and then had found a device that allowed him to not just him to planeswalk, but to planeswalk an entire army of undead soldiers that he strong-armed Liliana Vess into controlling because she was the most powerful necromancer in the multiverse. And then he knew that was going to cause this distress beacon to go out across the multiverse for all these planeswalkers to come in to help the Gatewatch actually overturn this army. But he had also gotten the Immortal Sun from Ixalan to this plane via the planar bridge that was in Tezzeret's chest at the time. So when you planeswalk to Ravnica, you couldn't planeswalk away. And so he
weren't kidding.
He just trapped every planeswalker in the multiverse in Ravnica and then started executing the Elder Spell. Ben, he used an enormous undead army to rip the Planeswalker Spark out of every Planeswalker he get his hands on to smash them into one giant Planeswalker Spark that he was going to eat to become a god again.
Okay. In my answer, I wrote that he seeks multiverse domination, but I'll give you full marks for your answer.
That was, best storyline in Magic.
All right.
Okay. So when did a celebration of Christian Christmas begin?
Okay, so I'm not a super good historian on this, but I know the Romans obviously saw some political benefit to harnessing the burgeoning belief in Christian religion, and they adopted that, I'll say, in 70 AD.
Ooh, that's a lot earlier than it actually happened.
Okay.
So in the 4th century, the Romans established a feast for the memory of the birth of the Savior. That was in the 4th century. So was that 300 something AD?
Yeah.
But then the 5th century, the Roman Catholic Church came in and said, okay, this feast that we've been having for the Savior, we're going to make that also coincide with the 25th of December.
All right. 4th century AD. I was way off.
It's fine.
Okay. I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit here and ask you one that I think you might not know the answer to. Name a player who has won more than one Magic World Championship and describe their impact on the competitive scene.
Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, this is a complete blind spot for me as the Spike tournament grinder guy. Like, I mean, I could guess. Who's the guy that you shared a cab with?
There you go.
Johnny Magic?
John Finkel.
There you go, John Finkel. Okay.
All right, I'm giving you full marks for that one. He also had an outsized cultural impact for notoriously being outed as a geek by some social media blogger on the internet.
I didn't know that. That was back before being a geek was cool. He's winning world championships. He's making big money playing this card game, but it still wasn't.
So there was a girl that, I don't know, blogged for some fashion magazine or something. She matched up with him on a dating site, or I don't know what. They went on a date. Over the course of the date, she asked him, what do you do? And he said, I'm Magic World Champion. And she went back and wrote a blog post about, can you believe the nerve of this guy going out with someone like me? He has this nerd hobby, and she got roasted on the internet.
Absolutely, as she should. Well, now nerd culture is cool again. Like I was in college. This was the early 2000s. Where I was still like looked down on, like people.
This event is right up there with like Gamergate as far as its significance, kind of in the cultural blogosphere. Johnny Magic, the Magic World Champion, getting outed by a girl for being how dare he go on a date with a woman. Other correct answers might have included Kai Budde, the German juggernaut, Shahar Shenwar, the Israeli back-to-back world champion in 2013 and 14, and Paulo Vitor Damarosa, maybe one of the greatest players of all time.
This is your Feast of Saturnalia question.
Yeah,
that's what it is. This is you knew I didn't know this question.
I knew you weren't going to know it. All right, give me my next one.
All right, what year? I'm sorry, you're not the historian guy, but in what year was the first Christmas tree decorated in the White House?
Ooh. Okay, so if in 1870 it was made a federal holiday, I'm going to say 1870.
See, you would think that, but no, the first Christmas tree was decorated in the White House in 1840, before it was a federal holiday.
Huh, okay. All right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. All right, I got a rules one for you.
Okay.
What happens? This one came up this week in my real life, and I just want to know the answer.
That's convenient.
What happens if you cast Chaos Warp targeting an opponent's commander, and they choose to move the commander to the command zone? Tell me all the game actions that happen after that in the resolution of Chaos Warp. Look up Chaos Warp if you
I've got
to.
Chaos Warp, yeah. It's Red's best removal spell. You get to pick the owner of target permanent, shovels it into their library, reveals the top card of the library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. So, that's interesting because they didn't actually shuffle it.
Yep.
Okay. So the way that the commander thing works, so they put this spell in the stack. I am targeting your commander. I paid my costs. Okay, this spell is on the stack. There is no responses. Priority goes around. The spell resolves. Now what we have is the commander replacement effect, because this is telling it, okay, shuffle your commander into your library. But anytime,
but they're not going to do that.
They're not going to do that because in Commander, anytime your commander would change zones, doesn't matter what zone that is, anytime it would change zones, you have the option of putting it into the command zone instead as a replacement effect. That doesn't stop the effect of Chaos Warp, I don't think.
So do they shuffle, one, and two, do they reveal a permanent from reveal the top card of their library?
I'm going to say that they do shuffle, and I'm going to say that they do reveal the top card of their library anyway.
So there have been some changes in the Commander format over the years, particularly like whether or not you shuffle, but I think the most recent version of the rules is, yes, you would still shuffle even though no card is being shuffled into the library, and then the spell does resolve. I couldn't find a definitive answer on this one. I was hoping you'd be able to explain why. I don't actually know, because you're acting like something happened that didn't happen.
Well, and so the answer is because Commander layered on some extra rules that aren't built into the original rules of the game. And if it worked the way that you think it was, like, I didn't actually shuffle anything in my library, so I don't have to do the other thing, that's just a feel bad, right?
Right, because typically we call that fizzles.
Yes.
The thing the spell was trying to do didn't happen, so the spell fizzles and it doesn't do all of its things.
But here's the thing. That the fizzling, the countered upon resolution, is because it has no longer any valid targets. That actually happened to me in a vintage game, and oh man, Ben, did I blow out my opponent because of it. So my opponent cast a Molten Fury. I don't remember what the card is. It's a multimodal spell where you get to pick the modes, okay? He picked deal 1 damage to all of my... 2 damage to all my creatures, 1 damage to my face or something, and then... blow up target artifact. Okay. So he was going to wipe my board of 1/1 flyers because I was playing the Thopter combo, and he was going to blow up the thing that was making my Thopters. Well, what I did instead was, with that on the stack, I sacrificed the Thopter thing that he was targeting to itself to make another Thopter.
So the only mode of that spell that had a target no longer had a target.
No longer had a target. And so all of the targets for the spell became invalid. It is countered upon resolution. I got to keep all of my other stuff. Completely blew him out of the water. And I like to think
I bet he was so mad.
I like to think the 3 minutes that he spent on his chess timer trying to figure out what just happened was because he didn't realize that I had made a 200 IQ play and blew him out of it.
Well done.
So, but this one, this isn't countered upon resolution because the target never became invalid. It was targeted, it was destroyed, it was on its way to your library having been destroyed when you decided to put it into the command zone instead with this extra rule that doesn't exist.
So you still shuffle and then you still reveal the top card.
That's right.
All right.
Okay. All right, Ben. We've been talking a lot about history, and your dad figured out exactly when Christ was born. So what year was Christ born?
How do I express this? So the bottom line from all my dad's calculations, and I can't tell you the depth to which we've studied this. We've gone as far as to start a first draft of an academic paper.
Wow, okay.
Detailing this. I can't express it as well as my dad, which is part of the reason the paper isn't written yet. Because I'm here to turn it into plain English because my dad just goes off on astronomy geek land and it's really hard to understand. I think it's correct to say that he was born on April 6th, the year that we traditionally call 0 AD.
Okay. There are... that is not what I've got. But again, I don't know what I've got. So this was saying that... for a couple of different things, okay? There are 2 pieces of evidence that people point at to say, Christ was already born. Or was born in either 3 or 2 BC. And one of those was because apparently it's quoted that Jesus was born 6 to 12 months before the death of Herod the Great. Right. And Herod the Great died in 1 BC. So Herod the Great had to have...
Yes. Yeah. And these are parts of this understanding that there are other events, but they can't really be nailed down with a great deal of certainty. So
got it. Oh, yeah. And I get that. The other one was the census that theoretically Joseph and Mary were traveling to go be a part of took place in 3 BC.
Right.
So that's the kind of crap that people are pointing at, like, oh, well.
Sure. No, those, both good things. But those political things that happened, we're counting backwards.
Who
and
knows?
what historical accounts do we have to nail those down to exactly when they happened, as opposed to astronomy? Like,
I get that. Yeah. How many times has the calendar changed between now and 0 BC? Wait, is it? Hang on a second. Is it 0? Is 0 BC or AD? It would be 0 AD.
0 AD. AD means Anno Domino. It's Latin for in the year of our Lord. It means the year he was born.
So 0 is AD.
Yes.
Okay.
Your next question. Another rules question. If a creature with trample attacks a player and is blocked by a creature with protection from its color, how is damage calculated and assigned?
Okay. So this is all about the damage rules and not about...
And protection.
So protection means debt. It can't be damaged, equipped, blocked, or targeted by something of the thing that it has protection from.
Sure.
So you've got a protection from green creature with toughness that is irrelevant, and then you have a trample creature that is attacking that is green. So the trample rules override the protection rules because trample says you as the attacking player have to assign lethal damage to the blockers before any damage goes past it and into the player. So if your protection creature has 2 toughness, you only have to assign 2 damage to that thing, and then all the rest of the damage goes onto the player.
Okay, I don't actually know. I don't know the right answer.
How are you asking me questions that you don't have the answer to? I don't know.
Okay, peek behind the curtain. I got some help with ChatGPT for these questions. Here's what ChatGPT thinks. Damage from the trample creature is only assigned to the player if the blocker is assigned lethal damage. Since protection prevents all damage from that source, no damage tramples over. That's what ChatGPT said. I don't think that's right.
I don't think it's right either. Trample and protection. I'm telling you. Does trample go over protection? Yeah, you have to assign damage equal to the toughness to the creature, and the other 5 will trample over.
So, yeah, that one I think was just wrong.
Dang it, ChatGPT being confidently wrong about a game.
All right, so I'm giving you full credit for that one. What's my next one?
Okay. I don't know how easy this is. I didn't know how to phrase this question well, so I'm going to give you the easy version of it. True or false? Puritans in 17th century England supported the celebration of Christmas.
Ooh, that sounds tricky. I'm going to say, that could go either way. Like it could either be a sign that you are, aligning yourself with the pagan practices at the past, at the origins of that, and the whole thing that the Puritans were doing to distinguish themselves from other Christians is getting away from all that. Or it could have been their example of the most pure thing you could do to align yourself with the true tenets of Christianity. I'm going to go with the first one. I'm going to say false.
False is the correct answer. In 1647, a Puritan-led English Parliament outlawed Christmas in England. And in 1659, Puritan colonists in Massachusetts Bay banned Christmas and assigned a 5-shilling fine for celebrating Christmas.
Could you get canceled for celebrating Christmas?
You could get canceled for putting a Christmas tree in your front window in early Massachusetts Bay Colony. They believed that it was idolatry and an excuse for hedonism.
Unacceptable,
freaking Puritans. Puritans famously so stuck up the British kicked them out.
All right, here's your next question. Which was the best-selling Magic the Gathering set of all time?
The best-selling Magic set of all time?
Best-selling Magic set.
Best-selling set of all time. That has to be recently because Hasbro's posted nothing but growth over time. I want to say it's one of the Gothic horror ones because it just won't stop. It's gotta be Ixalan's wrong. What's the werewolfy one? The original one. Not Duskborn. You know what I'm talking about. The vampires and the werewolves.
This is your question.
I know what set it is. What the hell is the name of this stupid thing? My brain keeps saying Ixalan. No, that's the one I like because it's got Aztec merfolk. It's the Emrakul was imprisoned in the moon, which drove this entire plane crazy, and they had to put Avacyn. It's not that. No, that's the name of the angel. Avacyn went absolutely psycho, was murdering everybody, and they had to lock her away in a tomb. Oh, what the hell is the name of that plane, though?
I love that you remember the stories.
Well, because, all right, so that's the thing. In the Landfall set, which was where all the Hedrons were, that's the only way they could get rid of the Eldrazi's. They had to lock them away. Go
ahead, look it up.
It's going to be the set that Avacyn was originally printed in.
Innistrad.
Innistrad, thank you, yes. Innistrad, that I'm going to say is the best-selling set of all time.
Okay, you took a wrong turn when you said that. What you should have said is which partnership with intellectual property led to the best-selling Magic set of all time.
Oh,
I'll give you another guess.
Is it Universes Beyond is the best-selling of all time? Then it must be Lord of the Rings. Yeah, no.
Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth was the best-selling Magic set. It generated approximately $200 million of revenue within 6 months of its release.
That's not fair, because they put an actual Willy Wonka golden ticket into that set.
There were people in factories opening up chocolate bars willy-nilly.
We did a whole episode about it. Yes, like people that had nothing to do with magic were tearing packs open left and right.
All right, but I'm not giving you credit for that one.
Yeah, I don't deserve it.
What's my next question?
Okay. So, who was credited as the first person to decorate a Christmas tree with lights?
Ooh, well, okay, I know it was candles at some point, but the fact that you asked who must mean that it's someone famous that's getting credit for this? You're talking electric lights.
No, I'm not talking electric lights. I'm talking either candles. Yeah,
okay.
It's probably candles.
Why would it be who? I'm Johann Sebastian Bach. I don't know.
Right from Ben's backside. No, the sources that I have, which are not good ones, say that it was Martin Luther.
Huh.
Walking home one winter evening, he was awed by the stars twinkling through the evergreens, and he wanted to try to recreate the scene for his family.
Excellent. All right, here is your last question. Name the first set released exclusively for the modern format and explain why it was significant.
Ooh, the first set that was released exclusively for modern. That's got to be Modern Horizons, the original Modern Horizons. That was culturally significant for a lot of reasons. One, I don't think Modern was it a set? Was they transitioning from the Type 2, Type 1 mentality to create Modern as its own set? That might have been one reason. Let's see. It could have been the first time that Wizards acknowledged that there were people playing the game in ways that they didn't either intend it to be played or weren't fully supported by them, and they decided to then support it and make it official. I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah. It wasn't Modern Horizons, though. It was called Modern Masters, but I'll give it to you.
Okay.
And it was significant because it, established this pattern of acknowledging the specific needs of a format, reprinting key cards and printing ones that are specifically designed for that environment that wouldn't play well in other formats.
The printing. That's always the thing. The business behind reprints is fascinating.
All right, I wasn't keeping a tally. I'll tally it up when I'm doing the editing, and I'll make an infographic. But I feel like you got about half of them.
I think we did okay. It was fun. It was fun answering questions. It was not fun looking up questions for you. I'm not going to lie.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas to you and our listeners. Thanks to our listener who requested that. Maybe we'll revisit it again sometime in the future. I want to know how you did. That particular listener, you know who you are. We talked about you during this episode in one of our story anecdotes. And if you have anything you want to say about the podcast, you can go on our Facebook page or you can go on our subreddit. Links in the show notes. And we'd love to hear what you have to say, and we'd love interacting with you.
I'm not going to do my whole spiel about you guys doing the things that you need to do to support us. You know what those things are. If you like us or you want to support us, you know the ways that you can do that. Instead, I'm just going to say happy holidays. It's been an honor and a privilege to sit here with barely any effort and talk to my friend every other week and drink beer the whole time. So thank you all for making that a thing.
Yes, definitely. Happy holidays. And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.